That's good. I like that we have no quiz. Fine. Thank you. Does anybody? I printed yours.
Okay.
And I got Kirsten's. And you guys, so hopefully everybody is either thinking about sending me this take home test or has it for me.
Or your Dakota.
I said it. She didn't print it out. So don't
She
do
did.
it.
He did. He did. He did. Y'all stop abusing each other. Yeah. So, and thank you, Molly. So if you haven't turned that in yet, you know who you are. And if your grade is not up yet, it means I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Okay. So a lot of you have grades already up for that. All right, guys. So this morning or this afternoon or whatever time it is right now, I'm not even sure. Afternoon, I guess. What we're going to do is we're going to, and this is what I say that is kind of like the fun stuff, because the organ systems start now, and we get to talk about infectious diseases of each of these particular organ systems. Many of them you will have heard of because we've been introducing them as we've been going. But this chapter is where your lists really come into play, and we start really talking about these infectious agents and what diseases they cause, right? So you might want to just have that kind of handy, because we will start adding to our list. A lot of them you already have. So if you can take it out, if you want, you might want to do that now. Okay. And let's go ahead and get going. Today we also, it's chapter 16. I think that's where this starts. We finished 15, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay. So it's chapter 16. And did I start the recording? Does anybody care if it's recorded? Is anybody listening? Okay, so it is. All right. So today we're going to, in lab, we're going to do some microscopy in lab today. And you're also going to try to sign up for your dates of your little, call them presentations. They're not. It's discussions. That's all it is. You got the rubric for what you need to do. You know what you need to do. And you're going to kind of tentatively sign up. It can be flexible, presentation-wise. So if, like, Casey signs up for whatever, April 26th, I don't even know if that's a Monday or a Wednesday. But if she signs up for that and something comes up, it's fine. As long as you get it done before we finish up. Okay? All right, so in lab today, there will be a sheet going around for you to try to sign up for a day that you think would be a good day for you. Those presentations will be done in here during, or maybe we'll have to actually go to the lab, but it's just going to be casual. It really is, okay? So during lab time, because lecture time we'll be talking about this. So any questions about that? So make sure you sign up today for the date that you think will be the best for your schedule, if you can. We can probably do 4 or 5 a day in that lab time. All right. Any other questions for me? Anybody see anything on the news they want to bring up before we get going? Yeah. Oh, good, Jan.
You ever hear of Candida auris?
Candida auris is another type of yeast. Is a yeast causing candidiasis. What is that article about?
And it's like something they can't get rid of. You can clean it room, and it's they did everything they normally do to get rid of it, but it was still there. But it kills people with weakened immune systems, like older people.
So this is happening in like medical facilities. Is that what you're saying? So it's been.
Yeah, this was in Mount Sinai. This was elderly man got Jake cleaned the room. Everything was positive in the room, even tiles from the ceiling, and they cleaned the room, but everything else was dead, but that ours.
Yeah. So is it Candida? Is it Candida?
Candida auris. Auris meaning ear, they said.
Yeah.
It was first found in somebody's ear.
Yeah. So that's a yeast, and so yeast can be a little bit. They usually are pretty easy to clear, but maybe this is one that's really resistant. Yeah. Yeah. So that doesn't sound good, does it? Yeah. So we'll keep an No pun intended. We'll keep an ear out for that. If we hear about it, but just understand that, Sarah,
I didn't know if you heard that there was a case of the moms at Longwood.
I did hear that last week. Somebody told me, I forgot, it was one of you guys, one that told me, I think it was somebody in the A&P class that said, had mentioned that there was a mumps case at, in Longwood. So do you know what they're doing? Did they send, what'd you say?
So it's here.
So did you know what they did? Did they send out an email?
Yeah,
Or
they sent us all told us that like the person was being isolated and.
not to worry, not to panic. You know, most young adults have had immunizations, and so most of you are protected anyway. But you do worry about the ones who didn't get them for whatever reasons. Maybe they're immunocompromised and couldn't, or for whatever reason didn't get them. And then you would worry about that. So I'm glad they sent out that notification, and hopefully they did quarantine down. There have been a lot of mumps outbreaks at Virginia at colleges in just the last decade. So mumps seem to be, the numbers are increasing too. What'd you say?
I said, oh, I want to stay away.
Do you have mumps? Oh, you say you don't want to get it from, yeah. Well, you probably have protection.
I love having surgery.
Everybody out.
Yeah, no, mumps is nothing compared to some things, but no, it can be, because those are rare cases where people can have mumps, and especially males, it can descend into the gonads and cause sterility. So it can, so you want to protect the whole population for those few times that the mortality rate's there for any of those infections. All right. Thanks for bringing that up, though. I had heard about the mumps case at Longwood. Anybody else? It seems like there was something I meant to bring, but I forgot. Nobody else has anything? All right. Well, so we'll get started today. We've got your little list kind of close by. You're going to recognize a lot of the things that we start talking about as we move through these different organ systems. You've been introduced to a lot of them, but maybe just hearing them again can help you to really make these sort of second nature to you, that when you hear the names of these organisms, these microorganisms, you know right away which group they belong to, the disorders or diseases they may cause. So the integument, the skin, we know it's our largest organ, isn't it? And it's our first line of defense. And because it's our first line of defense, it's often insulted, right? So we understand that it can often be breached because of injury, because of pathology, because of a lot of different things. The skin can become compromised, and then are you at risk for potential infections? Yeah. So just some basic anatomy about the skin, and I know most people have had, some basic anatomy and physiology, so they understand this, is that we have two layers of the skin. The most superficial layer is the epidermis. Epi means on top of or above, right? And it's sitting on the dermal layer, the dermis layer. The epidermis has many, it has actually up to 5 layers itself. And the outermost one is the corneum, which has at least 25 to 30 dead layers of cells. That's protected. That's what we want, isn't it? We want it to be that much. You can actually have too few, or you can have a problem here in the corneum. When we talk about dander or dandruff, what layer are we talking about? The cornea. That's what we're talking about. When we talk about having exfoliation done, what are we exfoliating? Some of these superficial layers of the cornea, right? So anyway, the entire epidermis from the base layer, stratum layer, base, basale means base, the base layer, this is usually going to be completely replaced in up to 45 days. So in, let's just say 4 weeks or so, this is completely replaced. The living tissues in that stratum basale have pushed to the surface and are now being exfoliated. So that's the normal pace. Sometimes that pace gets off. And if that happens, then there can be diseases. We know an autoimmune diseases that accelerates that pace is psoriasis. Have you all heard of psoriasis? It is, if you haven't, you would want to know, it's an autoimmune disease, isn't it? Psoriasis. It is an autoimmune disease, not an infectious disease, not an autoimmune disease. But because psoriasis causes that acceleration of the growth in that epidermis, it causes the skin to crack open and bleed and have these hard, scaly areas. And does that set them up for potential infection then? If their skin is cracking and bleeding? Yes. No, you didn't ask me to spell it, because you're going to look it up. Psoriasis. Yeah, exactly. All right, so psoriasis. So you've got this epidermis sitting on this dermal layer. The dermal layer is where you find all those accessory structures like hair follicles, sweat glands, sebaceous glands. What are sebaceous glands secreting? Oil. So sebum. Sebum means oil, doesn't it? Sebaceous gland secretes sebum. Sebum is oil. Does it have a function?
Yes.
Absolutely. Has a function. It does protect. It helps to make the skin not so dry, because a dry skin is going to have more of a tendency to do what? Crack.
It works a little overtime on.
Well, so young people, because of the onset of hormones at puberty, because there's this cycle of hormones that are happening in males and females at puberty, that actually attracts the sebaceous glands and causes them to be active. And that's not a bad thing. That's a normal thing. Now, we're going to see, and we might as well add it now in case you didn't have this already. It's on your list. This sebaceous glands, they sort of, if they're cut, they almost look like glass. And in chemistry, but anyway, they're secreting oil into the hair follicle, and it's moving up to the epidermis and keeping that epidermal layer nice and supple instead of drying out. So that's actually a really good, important thing. But at puberty, they do start really producing a lot, and sometimes that can get blocked and clogged, and no air can get down in there. The bacterium Propionibacterium acnes. Propionibacterium acnes. The bacterium, guess what it causes?
Acne.
It causes acne. So like on the final exam in this class, I would probably ask you something. The cause of acne is, and you'd have to say bacterial, fungal, or what is the cause of acne? You'd say what?
Bacteria.
Or maybe I would ask you, acne is caused from which of the following genera? I wouldn't give you the species because the species names tell you, right? But you'd say what? Which one would you pick? Propionibacterium.
It sounds like hormone. People call people back in face. So
Well, that's one way to remember it. It is, Jenna. Nobody's going to forget that in here now. Did y'all hear what she said?
No.
She said that people with acne get called this name, pizza face, and something. Okay, well, hey, by the way, don't call people with acne any names, okay? But anyway, nobody can forget it now. So guys, this is a scanning electron micrograph of the cornea. And look how the hair follicle is coming out of the cornea. That's actually kind of beautiful, isn't it? You think? Okay. You might have that even on your wall as a piece of artwork. So anyway, we got this dermis layer that's connective tissue that has all those accessory structures. Sweat glands are called pseudoriferous glands. Sweat glands, pseudoriferous, and you can look it up. Pseudoriferous is what they're called. But the sweat serve a function.
Yes.
What does sweat serve a function? It's cooling you off, it's cooling you down, because can you overheat? Yes. Yeah, so we want our sweat glands working. We want our sebaceous glands secreting oil. We want them all working, but we don't want them working too little or too much because they can cause problems. Now, is our skin just filled with microbes?
Yes.
It is. It's filled with microbes, and we said that this is actually a really, really good thing. I'm making sure I don't. Look, millions of cells slough off daily. Those little things you see in lights, if you look through a light in a window and you see little things, that's skin cells sloughed off your family members or neighbors, and or dust mites, debris, so whatever. But yeah, right. And so we have lots of defenses, but one of the defenses is keratin. Keratin is the major protein that's produced in skin. It's the major protein, keratin. Our number one cell in our epidermis are keratinocytes, aren't they? This is kind of a review for A&P, and I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on that. I'd rather spend it on microbes. But keratin is really protective. It waterproofs us, and it's a strong protein, and so it's very protective. But we also have microbes that are living in and on our skin, and those microorganisms, just in their normal daily living, they're putting off products that are actually producing almost like an acid shield that we have. So if you think about it, you're walking around with this little shield, invisible shield, that's protecting you from other potential infections. So if everything's balanced the way that it should. Lysozymes, these are enzymes that we know play a role in breaking down potential pathogens. You good, Amanda? Right there? Okay. So these are all just part of that. As far as how many different ones, many different species of microorganisms, we said we're just beginning to understand what normal microbiome, which means the whole family, what normal microbiome should be present in these different body areas, and hoping to help people eventually, when they do have a problem, reestablishing these. We know it's different for different people have different species. So you can tell, what I think we talked about, you can tell family members how closely they're related by which kind of microbiomes they have. So in just looking at some of these species, I am certainly not going to make you memorize all the different ones, but Janet, I will bring to your attention, look at this one, Candida. That's yeast. We usually think of Candida albicans, but there are other species of Candida, which is yeast, that live in and on us and that are part of our normal flora. It's when things overgrow or take advantage that they become a problem, right? So the main, this whole thing, I hope y'all are seeing this reoccurring theme here, and that's that you should keep your immune systems what? Healthy, strong and healthy, exactly. And because it's just when they're down that they take advantage. We had this, we already talked about it. We talked about Staphylococcus aureus. It's a bacterium, isn't it? It's a bacterium. Not all Staph aureus are resistant, but many of them are. And many of them can actually transfer this resistant through plasmids to others as well, to other species that aren't. So again, making sure that we use antibiotics wisely and judiciously instead of overusing them, using things that are too broad spectrum when we don't need them. So anyway, Staph aureus, now it can be highly virulent, but we know that a lot of people actually carry this as part of their normal flora. Many of us that have ever worked in hospital or clinic environments, we have this as part of our normal flora in our noses. And they do talk about hospital-acquired MRSA versus community-acquired MRSA, but I wish they would just stop because it doesn't matter. We understand that it's out there, yes.
I just wanted to understand their toe, scraping their toe on the bottom of a pool.
Scraping their toe on the bottom of
And like, kind of like rotted out their toe. Like, not really, like, it's not, like, it's fine now, but it, like, exploded.
And I thought I was about to show y'all some bad pictures, but Molly is just describing what can happen. So infections can get out of control. We talked about there's no metabolic disorder or any disorder that is as rapidly devastating to a human body as an infectious process. So the key about this is to have good sense, not be like panicked or over whatever, because you can. Sometimes you can hear about some of these things and think, I'm never touching another person. But you don't. I mean, that's just silly, isn't it? And so you can't get like that, but you do have to, if something looks like it's about to get out of hand, you have to seek quick medical attention. Yes, Darren.
My dad got MRSA in his leg,
Uh-huh.
and he had to have a skin graft.
Oh, because it caused so much damage.
Yeah, so now, like, this whole part of his leg right here
Mhm.
had to be skin graft.
And that's a tough part. Whenever there's a bend somewhere and you have to have a graft, that's a really big. He's done okay though.
Yeah, they thought that they were going to have to amputate him, but luckily they were able to just skin graft without complications.
And
He was in the hospital for a good long while.
yeah, that's horrible. But that can happen because it's life-threatening. It gets to the bloodstream, and then a huge percentage of people who have sepsis die, even with medical treatment. Yes.
And
my toe exploded. Oh my God.
Okay.
Exploded.
So when we think about signs and symptoms, I'll show you the picture, right? So this is just this is just where it's kind of starting. And I don't know if this is from your textbook, so I don't know if you can see, but there's quite a margin of erythema, isn't it? Redness and swelling, and then obviously pus is coming from this. So in this area it can get pretty bad. So this is telling you what some of the lesions. Usually pus is going to be present. So there's usually going to be this, and fever can be present. So these are all going to be things that we look for. Now, and we look to think that this might be an infectious process, so we want to get on top of this. Not using people's razors, right? Electronic devices. Oh, this is just where they've been. It's like isolated from, like gym mats and stuff. You guys have heard of wrestlers having herpes, right? It's actually called herpes gladiatorum. It's like the gladiators. They can spread it this way because we don't tend to think about the herpes virus as living too long on inanimate surfaces. But these guys are really wrapped up together, aren't they? And I guess I shouldn't say guys because it's guys and guys. I guess you mostly guys. But yeah, and so you'll see like in high schools and stuff, this can be spread. But so can bacteria, and Staph aureus MRSA is a big concern with those gym mats, and not just with wrestlers, but with any gym mats. But now I think most gyms have, they have on all the equipment, you can wipe it down and you can do so. Anyway,
Which herpes is that? Is that HH6?
Sure, well, I'm talking about Staph aureus right now, but I will get to herpes in a minute. That's human herpes virus 1 and or 2. So 1 and 2 now are in a kind of interchangeable. They sort of consider that interchangeable because it used to be that we would only see herpes 1 above the waist and herpes 2, herpes simplex 2 below the waist, but they're very much interchangeable. And anyway, so this is the Staph aureus and kind of what it looks like. So what treatments and preventions, we know we have antibiotics that can take care of this. Now you would be very careful about the antibiotics you choose, and most of y'all have finished and handed in your assignment on that. I know it was, I thought it was very straightforward kind of questions about that, but I hope you realize it's really important that you're just treating what you're dealing with and not over treating. If you can, to try to narrow down the treatment as much as you can, and be careful also with dosaging. But anyway, so this is the lesions are going to be evaluated depending on how far you need to treat is what you're going to take care of. So these little boxes, again, I'm only going to be for these testing you on things that are on your sheet. But I love these little boxes, and you're going to get them for each of those microorganisms that we talk about, where it gives you everything. It tells you not just the organism's name, but it tells you how it's transmitted, some of the things that make it so virulent, some of the enzymes that can make it that way, how you go about identifying it, how to prevent it. Hygiene practices for this really is key. And it even does some specific treatments. But what are you going to be responsible for? This is just for your education, and I think they're awesome. And they're going to be for every one of these, but you'll be responsible for what's in that paper, okay? There are some definitions of things I'm going to want you all to know sometimes, like for this next thing. Maculopapular is referring to types of rashes. Sometimes these skin eruptions are what I call rashes. They can be flat, so macular, or raised. And it can be really tricky. I feel sorry for dermatologists because they're often looking at people and saying, I'm not really sure what that rash is from, but it's most likely it's from this, so we're going to try this treatment and see if this works. And a lot of times they do, but sometimes they don't. And rashes can be very, very tricky. They can be hard to identify. Measles. We are all hearing about measles, aren't we? We're hearing about measles outbreaks because of lack of compliance with immunizations. And what we need to know, measles killed before the vaccine, and this is worldwide, measles killed 6 million people every year. Now that's a fact. So that's really kind of all the information you need to maybe help somebody with if they're struggling with whether to have their child immunized, is looking at these types of facts, right? And the deaths from measles have dropped tremendously since immunizations have occurred, and also since good epidemiological practice have occurred where we see measles outbreaks in quarantine areas. Does having to do all that, though, add a lot to medical costs and expenditure when people are having to do those types of things when they maybe wouldn't have had to if people really were getting immunized? So something to be thinking about. What are the signs and symptoms? They're going to have their lymph nodes are going to be enlarged. They may have their eyes looking red. Conjunctivitis is inflammation of the conjunctiva, which is that lining of the eyes. May have a headache, sore throat, sort of a cough. So really what all that looks like is a little bit like the flu, isn't it? You know, students are always laughing at here because they say, God, well, everything starts with flu-like symptoms. And that's kind of like rashes, because sometimes rashes you don't know what they're really from. It's sometimes a process of elimination. But anyway, this rash, when it does show up, when this rash shows up on the body, you know, it's definitely a clue. Here's a sign. Most of you all haven't seen measles rash, have you? But anyway, it's going to be kind of obvious when this is breaking out. So the problem comes in is when you have that rare case where, because a lot of times people will, you know, most people are going to get over this and then have natural active immunity forever, the rest of their life. But the problem comes in with sequelae, and we know sequelae means complications from that. And we don't always see it in people who are immunocompromised, but they're the ones we usually see sequelae. Sequelae can happen even in somebody who is perfectly healthy that had measles. They can go into this. So secondary bacterial infections, not just sinus, but also pneumonias, right? And the mortality rate of bacterial pneumonia goes way up compared to viral pneumonia. And then those rare cases of people who have measles that will go into encephalitis. What does encephalitis mean? Inflammation of the brain. And everybody understands sinusitis means inflammation of the sinuses. And pneumonia is going to be an increase in fluid in the lungs, right? So thickening of the membranes of the lungs. So none of these sound very good, do they? And then this SSP, this subacute sclerosing panencephalitis, this is when the mortality rates are just really very high. Leads to coma and can lead to death. So, well, it's on your PowerPoint. So the main thing I want you to know is measles can lead to encephalitis, can it? And it can lead to serious consequences, even secondary infections like bacterial pneumonias. So, and it's what? Preventable, isn't it? So now, these slides and also in your textbook, it gives you like family and of these viruses, but I just want you to know we'll call it the measles virus, okay? So, okay, highlight what did I want you to know from this? So this is just telling you like the pathogenesis of this and virulence factors and why the viremia. What does viremia mean? What would that mean? Emia always means what? In the bloodstream. Viremia means what's in the bloodstream. The virus is carried into the bloodstream. It's going to the skin and to the other organs, and then you end up getting this rash, this characteristic kind of rash with this. But this is showing you a little bit about what is happening and why it's happening. So for every one of these diseases, most of this is just FYI. You can take a look at it. Okay, so it's a whole bunch of stuff. MMR. Y'all would want to know that vaccine stands for measles, mumps, and rubella. So I think you already know that. It can have protection for a long time. We do think the mumps part of that is actually waning after a certain number of years. This is why we're seeing mumps outbreaks in our college campuses, because most people have had that immunization 20 years before. And so the mumps now we are seeing. So it's probably not going to be long from now, since we've had quite a few outbreaks of mumps on college campuses lately, that they're going to maybe suggest that people get a booster for mumps if they're going to four-year institutions or colleges. So it might be something that you're going to be hearing here soon for any of those. So really with viruses, what can we do? You all saw antiviral medication, didn't you? You saw antiviral medication, but the fact is, what can we really do for these viruses?
Treat the symptoms.
Exactly. And so you're going to do that. If it's a very communicable one, a very contagious one, you're going to try to isolate and that kind of thing. But you're going to treat the symptoms. That's exactly what you're going to do. And you're going to try to have that person understand that it's really important that for a while after they have the disease, they're immunocompromised. So they really should be careful of not going out and overdoing it because they could get something secondary on top of it. All right. So rubella. Rubella used to be called, and it's still called, the German measles. So anyway, this is another one that people, we rarely see anymore. The serious damage can happen to the fetus, so we said that means it's teratogenic. We understand that that it's going to be important to try to protect yourself from rubella. So anyway, y'all can kind of go through some of these if you want to. Some of the signs and symptoms are the same, and they look like they can kind of overlap. But anyway, this rubella virus, we can just call it the rubella virus. It's fine to call it that. Let me see if there's something I wanted to tell you about. What does it mean when you say it's endemic? What does that mean? It's going to be in the population. So it's in the populations. We expect a certain number of them to happen. It's not like we've ever gotten rid of it, really. So it is kind of endemic. But what we don't want to see are epidemics, do we? It can mimic a lot of other diseases, just like a lot of these can. So why would IgM antibody testing be important? Because what is that? It's a what? No, IgM.
They're the first.
It's the first response, exactly. It's the first response. So if somebody has this specific IgM titer ordered and they're seeing IgM going up it's the first time. It's a diagnosis for this particular disease because it can be kind of tricky to identify. All right, so here's another one. And I highlighted this because this is, I don't know if y'all heard of this. Have y'all heard of slack cheek disease? Yeah. So this is actually referred to as Staph disease. And the reason they kind of did this is because there's so many things that can cause rashes in children. Scarlet fever being one of the first. What is scarlet fever from? What's that rash from? That's from streptococcus infection. So streptococcal infection. So you can have this really dry, sandy kind of rash that can occur. Measles, we just said, rubella. And now this is another one. For this one, it said it's called slack cheek. I hope I have a picture. Do I have a picture? Oh, well, there's a picture down here in these that are all kind of like together. But anyway, slack cheek is, and I say children, it doesn't have to be children, but usually people have it children. So anyway, erythema infectiosum. What does erythema mean? Erythema means red, doesn't it? Red. So what will happen is they'll start with a fever, and then they'll look like somebody has just slapped them, and they get really, really red in their face like this, and it's kind of diagnostic. It's usually really mild, and so with these types, I think our culture now is sometimes making diseases spread more rapidly than others, because in our culture now, if somebody starts with a fever or whatever, they immediately get taken where? Hospital. Well, hope not the hospital, but to the doctor's office. And sometimes the ER, you're right, Jenna. So sometimes they are. And then when that's happening, what are you doing? Spreading it, right? Where sometimes it's just not, you don't need to be doing that. And so just treating the symptoms. Taking antipyretics are going to be helpful in just treating the symptoms of this. It's typically pretty mild, and it's going to resolve itself. And most of us have actually even had this. This is from the parvovirus B19. I do think I have that in there on your chart. Do I? No viruses. So anyway, this is from a parvovirus. Y'all have heard of parvoviruses. We're from rural America. Where have we heard of parvoviruses? It's dogs, and it can kill them, can't it? It's very similar to this one. So anyway, parvovirus that's in that category, and it's very contagious. It's incredibly contagious, and this is why most kids have had it.
What happens when dogs get it?
Well, they can, they can die, right? I think they have, sometimes they try to treat them, don't they? I don't
Not
think so.
really. It just comes on so rapidly that they die.
They
You
usually
catch
die.
it like
Yeah.
right at the beginning.
Yeah.
But then when it happens,
Yeah, so that's that, but anyway, oh, it seemed like there was something else, was something else. If you have this, and I don't even know if this textbook is talking about it, talks about it, but it can be teratogenic too. And because it's so widespread, whatever, if somebody has a child that has it and they're pregnant for the next whatever time, then sometimes they'll actually do a little bit in prenatal planning. They'll do more ultrasounds. They'll just make sure that it doesn't look like anything happened. But most of us, and this happened with me, with my second child. My first child had this, and I knew exactly what it was, but I knew I probably had it myself because we had everything back in the day. So anyway, we didn't have immunizations, we had everything. But if you're a young woman and you haven't had it, and you get it from your child getting it, then it could become teratogenic for that next child. Yes, did you have a question, Jared?
Kind of. I was wondering if parvovirus B19 is also considered zoonotic.
Zoonotic. So no, this is actually, this particular one you get it from each other. It's incredibly contagious. So we don't consider this something that you had to get from an animal, and it's endemic. So this roseola is also one of those viruses that are typically pretty mild. And again, the rash is going to be really diagnostic because it's usually going to appear a few days after that really high fever. And that the fever can be really high and then kind of go down, then be high again. But then in a few days, you get this rash that appears, and then it's on the chest and trunk, and you know they had roseola. So, again, no need to necessarily take them out, in public and whatever, because these are very contagious. But treating signs and symptoms and just watching. What's the main thing to worry about when little kids have high fevers? Okay, well, so seizures from high fevers are pretty rare, but they can happen. And they happen typically because the fever goes up so quickly. And it's dehydration. That's what can happen to all, not just the rare case of seizures. But febrile seizures are real. They can happen. And so if somebody's ever had a febrile seizure, they're much more at risk of having another one when their temperature changes again. So, you need to be on the alert for that, and just be sure at the first sign of any temperature increase that you're giving antipyretics for those people. Usually, do we really worry too much about a fever, though, unless it gets too high? Yeah, but anyways, if somebody's had febrile seizures, you give them antipyretics right away.
You said this is a virus, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just letting you know it's not a sheep.
Roseola, is it?
It's called hematopoiesis.
Oh,
The sixth disease. So do I ever say roseola in there at all?
Yeah, it's on. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Okay, thank you, and thank you both for catching that, because I do want you all. I sort of promised you all this is what we do at the end, right? You can imagine if you've never heard of any of these until now. But anyway, remember, even though these in your textbook have a lot more information about all of these diseases, what will you be asked about? What can be found where? But if it's on that chart, will you be responsible for it? Okay. Yeah. So causative agent is human herpes virus 6, and sometimes there's another one that can do it too. Again, look at this. It's thought that 100% of the population has this by the time this is another one of those very common ones, by the time they're in adulthood. So if you just wanted to look at these little tables I told you that are so awesome, that sort of give you everything about the diseases, the different ones, and you want to look at more about this, then you can kind of see that. And they give you pictures of some of these different kind of rashes, and honestly, a lot of them look a lot alike. They really do. So, now, I want to talk about impetigo. I think I've mentioned this to you all, right? If I hadn't, I want to talk about it now. Impetigo is a superficial infection of the skin, but it can be, and I wish I had a picture. Actually, I could probably go on the internet and just pull up a picture for you, but maybe I will do this. This skin infection that's really superficial is so diagnostic, and it's the way it looks. Like, it's so easy to diagnose. It's going to cause flaking and almost a golden type of crusty exudate. It is just so easy to diagnose. It's going to cause some redness around it, but this flaky golden exudate that is just going to, you're going to know it's impetigo. Now, I do this around the face because a lot of times it is around the mouth, and these lesions can get huge, or around the nose, or it's on their knees because little kids skin their knees, right? Or skin their knees and hands or whatever, so it can be, and it's very, very contagious. I do want you to know that babies, if babies have this, it often is because of Staphylococcus aureus. But most cases of impetigo is because of Streptococcus pyogenes. Almost all cases are going to actually be because of Streptococcus pyogenes. So do we know that also causes what? Rheumatoid strep causes what?
So in babies, it's Oreos.
In babies, it can be because of aureus, and I'm talking about little bitty babies. It can be because of Staph aureus. Staph aureus in little bitty babies also causes something called scalded skin syndrome. And scalded skin syndrome, which I will be in here in a minute, I think. But if that happens in a neonatal unit or a pediatric unit at a hospital, they're shutting that area down because it is so contagious. And when I say scalded skin syndrome, you see a little baby with this, they look exactly like their skin has been scalded. Janet, do you have a picture of that? Do they have a picture in your textbook? Let me see if that's not right. Okay, but yeah, that's impetigo, but I was thinking of scalded skin. The scalded skin is, well, if you can just imagine scalded skin, that's exactly why it's called that. Yeah, it's just horrific looking. It's really horrific looking. So anyway, that's babies, but I want you to know that everyone else you're thinking about strep pyogenes, and it's very contagious. So if you have like a little kid, what are they doing? They're touching each other, aren't they? And little kids have scrapes, and so now you've got everybody in your family has it. And, you know, it needs to be treated. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be treated. It needs to be stopped, the spread of it, because it can scar. And you don't want scarring. I've got scars on my knees that are from impetigo when we were little. That, you know, whatever. So, all right, so impetigo. And y'all know what it causes. I mean, yeah, you know what causes it. Let me see if there's something else I want to do. Now, again, since we're talking about Streptococcus pyogenes, we know it causes pharyngitis, doesn't it? Do you get treated for your pharyngitis? No. You get treated to prevent. We do get treated, you know, to control the bacteria, but you get treated to prevent acute glomerulonephritis, don't you, and rheumatic fever. So that's why you're really getting treated, to suppress the immune response so that you don't get those two things afterwards. If you have impetigo, you could actually spread that to somebody and give them strep throat, right? But this Streptococcus pyogenes, this would be on your little sheet. It should be in your sheet. It also causes something called necrotizing fasciitis. Have y'all ever heard of that? Yes. That's actually commonly referred to as flesh-eating disease. So necrotizing means what? This is on your chart. The tissues are dying. They're dying, and the tissues are dying, and it's of the fascia, which are actually holding your muscles to the skin. So guess what's happening then? What you say? So now I'm going to make y'all sit through some pictures. You ready? So, just because you can't wait.
It's just for yes, there. I had a resident from that. It was
All right, so here you go. These are some, but I've seen more that look like this. And guys, this has a high mortality rate, and it's incredibly contagious.
if you could
They have-
they,
Oh yeah, they would have to do a, so this was there was recently an outbreak of this in a local skilled care facility. So guess what they did? 8 of the 12 patients ended up going to the hospital and being isolated. I think a couple died, but they did catch the others quickly enough. But they closed that whole ward down, and of course came in and cleaned. But this spreads quickly, and in a person, it moves quickly. So, you're seeing a little red area at one time, and then all of a sudden, it's taken off, and it's sloughing the skin off. So necrotizing fasciitis. This is how you actually spell it. The other thing was spelled wrong that I had clicked on. And then I was going, it dies. The skin dies.
And what can cause this again?
Streptococcus pyogenes is what typically causes this.
it's like a big bacteria.
Scalded skin syndrome.
Oh,
So, and this is really what it does. So if this is this is Staph aureus now, right? So y'all know this is Staph aureus. But and this is what we worry about in little babies. Now, Staph aureus also causes, I'm joking around a little bit, but something called toxic shock syndrome. Have y'all heard of toxic shock syndrome? It's on all the tampon boxes, and it should be, because one of the first cases that was deadly that it was isolated from was from a woman who had used tampons overnight, which, ladies, come on, let's just admit that. That's something that you do. But they recommended since then stop doing that. Now, I don't know how many people stop doing that, but probably nobody. But they do know that. And they also changed some of the ways they make the tampons. But so anyway, to discourage that kind of growth. But people aren't supposed to leave tampons in more than 4 hours at a time. Right.
They have like 4 to 8 on the boxes or something. It's like some huge gap.
Yeah. So anyway, but it can happen it doesn't just because of tampon, it can happen in anybody. Toxic shock syndrome can happen to these babies that scalded skin. Staph aureus can progress to toxic shock syndrome, and the mortality rates are really, really high when that happens. So, but anyway, we'll get back to this impetigo and Streptococcus pyogenes. So we want to stop it as soon as we can, don't we? Impetigo is usually going to be just a really little localized area. And you're going to be able to get oftentimes topical treatment, but if they think it's serious enough and a large enough area, they will do oral treatment as well, so to get systemic treatment in there, not just topically. All right, so those are some of those things. All right, so cellulitis. What is cellulitis? If you didn't know, you should kind of know. This is going to be, again, very fast spreading, and it's going to be of the soft tissue, so the subcutaneous tissues. So inflammation of soft tissues. What you're going to see is somebody come in, and it's almost always on the extremities, like lower legs or arms, and it's usually lower legs. But they're going to have, and it might have been, who knows, it might have been like a bite from something or a little bit of a scratch, maybe. Usually you don't even see that though, because it looks like it's unbroken skin. But you've got this hot red area that looks like it's increasing pretty quickly, right? And it's inflammation of the soft subcutaneous tissues, and it requires immediate treatment. So cellulitis. Now, if it's close to the brain, then you got a whole new ball game, because if it's cellulitis and it's like on the leg or whatever, they're typically going to give an antibiotic, and usually say if it hasn't gotten better, if it's not getting better soon, then we're going to change the antibiotic or whatever. But you can have orbital cellulitis. And I've seen in kids,
Is it called encephalitis?
well, it can go straight to the brain. It can, but usually before you even have real signs of that, the patient's already gone. So if there's orbital cellulitis or cellulitis in the face anywhere, then this is going to be definitely a hospital stay, typically ICU, and not just oral antibiotics that you give somebody if they had it on their leg or somewhere. You're going to give IV and maybe even in the bone marrow antibiotics. I've seen people put in the head of the proximal end of the tibia antibiotics straight into the bone marrow because it was so dangerous. And so if you see somebody coming in with swelling in their face, and especially around their eye, then it's this, and it's obviously a very scary kind of thing. All right, so cellulitis. If it's healthy individuals, we usually think of it as being Staph aureus, really do. And so obviously that you're going to be aggressive in how you treat it. Streptococci are typically really sensitive to most antibiotics. Staph aureus can be a little bit trickier. And infants, group B streptococci. Why do we say group B streptococci? Group B is Streptococcus agalactiae. Let's look on our bacteria list. Streptococcus agalactiae, group B strep. Why are we thinking of that with infants? Because they just came through the where? The birth canal. And what do some women carry in the birth canal? Strep B. Some women carry strep B. So this is one that can definitely be in infants, one we're thinking about. And we know in infants, this bacterium can also go into the what? My A&P people know this. Streptococcus agalactiae, group B strep, is the most common cause of meningitis of the newborn. Meningitis of the newborn. So again, one needs to treat that. There's usually no breaks in the skin, but it could just be from trauma of the skin. And so the skin is maybe a bump or whatever. Anyway, now if somebody's immunocompromised, they can have cellulitis from anything. You know, you'll see all kinds of things called cellulitis in somebody who's immunocompromised. Just note what that means when you say cellulitis. All right. So scalded skin, this is that staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome, and y'all just saw pictures of this. And you can see that obviously this is something that causes widespread desquamation, which just means the skin is sloughing off, just like scalded skin would do. And y'all saw that one picture of what that looks like. Now, sometimes around the umbilical region, because we know that's like an open wound in an infant, isn't it? Typically, and this is why there's certain umbilical care that you should take care of with that. And anyway, what else? 30% of adults being asymptomatic carriers of this. And so we know this is an opportunistic infection, isn't it? This isn't a true pathogen. So when somebody has Staph aureus growing in cultures, it doesn't always mean it's a bad thing. It could just be part of their normal flora. So what do we use to help us to identify whether it's real or not? We do cultures, but what about the cultures? We use in our determination of whether it's real or not, we see if it's in pure culture. Because if something's in pure culture, was it real? Was it really causing disease? Yes. Meaning that's the only thing growing. Or if it's what? Predominating, right? I talked to y'all about quantification, understanding how you read those cultures and know reports and understand whether you're going to think of something as being potentially pathogenic or not. If it's part of normal flora, it would have to be at least equal to or predominating over the normal flora. All right, so Staph aureus, we talked about that. That's fine. Chickenpox, vesicular pustular rashes. Vesicular vesicles are going to be these little blistery looking things, aren't they? So vesicular or pustular rashes. So chickenpox is very common and usually, mostly benign. Of course, there are some, there is a mortality rate associated with it. And what do we know causes chickenpox? What's the varicella zoster? Varicella zoster. So we understand that. Now, smallpox is eradicated. So we hope that we're never going to ever see that again. That's actually done. But anyway, the pox itself is going to be a lesion that contains fluid. So has everybody seen chicken pox?
No.
No? Oh, okay. All right. So it's very easy to die, really, if you have it kind of all over. The problem comes in with the idea that there are a lot of things that can cause vesicular rashes. A lot of things. So if somebody has just vesicular rashes like on certain areas of their body, just that location, it's not chicken pox. Chicken pox is going to be all throughout. I mean, it's going to be all over these pox. And they're usually little bitty. Now, the very first ones that show up, the ones that first show up are usually pretty serious ones and usually leave a scar. Does anybody have chicken pox scars? Yeah. So those of us who got chicken pox usually know we've got a chicken pox scar somewhere we can show. But anyway, but that's what it looks like. And most of the little vesicles typically will heal and they won't even leave a scar because their margins aren't big enough to leave a scar. But look at the difference in smallpox. Can y'all see these pictures?
No.
Smallpox is just on a whole nother level. Now, luckily, like I said, that's been eradicated, hasn't it? So that has been eradicated, and we don't have to deal with that one anymore. The chickenpox is y'all do need to know, it's a respiratory-borne disease. So does that make it pretty easy to infect somebody? Yeah, so it's a respiratory disease. The problem with it and why it's so infectious too is not just that it's respiratory, well, but that it's got such a long incubation period, and you are actually infectious, and you can infect somebody during your incubation. So you don't even know you have it yet, but you're still traveling and touching, and hawking and maybe giving it to people. So this is why it spreads so quickly. Anyway. And usually we do think of it as being mild, but there is a mortality rate associated. The people who are the most at risk for chickenpox are going to be the immunocompromised. So really, really little kids, and especially little kids who have some underlying health issue. And it's also incredibly teratogenic. So if a young woman is pregnant and has never had chickenpox and gets it then, she will probably be okay. But might it devastate the fetus? Yes. So that's the problem that we said with it. And y'all know what the virus name is. And we know that another thing is that the people who have chickenpox have it staying in their system. It's in their system. So what it's going to do is, and the numbers are pretty low, but usually you think about thirds. So about a third of people who've had chickenpox will potentially develop what is called shingles. Yeah, I got all kinds of questions. Yeah.
Other than like the bumps and stuff, what else does it do? Like the chickenpox?
Oh, it causes respiratory, so like cough, fever, malaise, achiness. It can cause all those flu-like symptoms.
So is it the fever that can cause the death? Like what makes it?
No, it can actually migrate. So it's one of those things that you can end up getting something like encephalitis with too. So that's what you try to. And that's really, really rare, but it can happen, and they can get secondary bacterial infections too. So it's sort of like the same thing that we talked about before. It's the secondary things that can happen. Yes, Molly.
What's the virus? It's mainly in like younger kids, and it looks like they have zits like on their skin, and
Molluscum contagiosum.
and like the white seed pops out.
Molluscum contagiosum. I don't know if I have that on your list. That's a very kind of contagious virus too. It's also self-limited, so it will eventually go away. I had somebody who had a child who had, he has Krabbe disease, and so anyway, that's a very serious disease, autoimmune disease. She's actually in the nursing program now. She wouldn't mind showing y'all this because she got it. The only reason I'm talking about it is because she got it and showed the whole microclides. But her child had these pustules that they couldn't figure out, and she was talking about it. She said, I have pictures of them. So she showed us, and I said, that's molluscum contagiosum. So she called, and they ended up, she said, a micro teacher thinks that's what this is, and it was what it was. So he had it. He's pretty immunocompromised because he's had bone marrow transplants. So, but you don't have to have molluscum.
You said white.
Some people think of it as a sexually transmitted disease, and it certainly can be, but it is because sex, we're touching, right? So a lot of things can be sexually transmitted diseases, but it is not really common because little kids get it more than anybody. And it's usually kind of localized. I do this because it's often in these areas. But anyway, in other areas. So anyway, and it's usually self-limiting, but it can take a couple of years or so. And most people don't like it because it's, it can look kind of, no, not gross, but it doesn't even look zitty. It looks like something, like more than a zit.
City.
So, did you say zitty or city? What'd you say? Oh, okay. So here's, I think that's what we're talking about. So here's shingles, the way it came out. And you know what's interesting about this is how little this person, young this person looks. Because we used to really think of shingles as a disease. We used to really think of it as a disease in older people when their immune systems were starting to become immunocompromised. Things are falling apart, things hurt, whatever. That's another story. But anyway, now we're seeing it more and more frequently in younger people. So it's interesting that they had that thing there. But now, hopefully, we'll stop seeing it at all, because what should people be getting?
Vaccination.
Yes, the immunization. You have a question?
When I was lifeguarding over the summer a couple years ago, I had this one little boy who actually had shingles.
Yes.
And he came to the pool because it was like the least painful thing you could do for
Yeah,
him.
right.
And his mom said that his medicine threw off his equilibrium really bad. So that's why one of the reasons he was also in the pool, kind of to help him like balance or whatever. Because he could like not walk by himself.
Come for new medicine. Really? So the antiviral was affecting his nervous system?
Yeah, that's what she said. Because he had to she physically had to help him walk.
Wow. Yeah, I thought what you were going to say is that people there were nervous of catching this. Can you catch shingles? We know you can't, can you? Now, are these vesicles, and it's hard to see them, but there are little vesicles. Can y'all see they're glistening? They're filled with fluid. They're filled with they're like little blisters. Incredibly painful, supposedly. Incredibly painful because this nerve, this virus came back out along this nerve and is absolutely at every one of those little nerve endings, right? So incredibly painful during the time that you have these things going. And you are shedding virus. So you're shedding virus from these. So the thing is, you could be contagious to give somebody chicken pox, but you can't give them shingles, right? So, but it would take direct contact. So usually keeping it covered or keeping somebody from touching it, is all that you really need to do. What'd you say?
He wore t-shirts.
Yeah. And so this is called the human herpes virus 3. It's also, we said varicella zoster, so we know it's that. It enters through the respiratory tract. So, and then it touches those respiratory mucosas. So you end up getting cough, you get, fever, you can have all of this stuff. You do become viremic. And then, the pox kind of break out. It's typically considered in healthy people a mild disease. But with any of these mild diseases, we know it can get worse. So, all right. So chickenpox and shingles we kind of know about, don't we? And then we do have antivirals. But, antivirals, if they're not started early enough, they're really not going to do a whole lot. And if they were affecting the nervous system, you'd almost worry that the antivirals were worse than the illness itself. So smallpox, just because I want you all to know about smallpox, is the worry of that for people now. It's just if it's ever going to be used as a bioweapon. If anybody used it as a bioweapon, they'd have to have a death wish. But maybe that's the way bioterrorists think anyway. They do have a death wish, because they don't get all those versions at the end and all that stuff. Okay, never mind. So anyway, just saying, but that would be crazy because putting this out, look up smallpox. The mortality rate is ridiculous. And right now, the human population, the only people protected are the ones older than my age and older, because we have some protection from our immunization and our military. The military is usually getting a smallpox vaccine if they have to go anywhere. So So some of them, but nobody, no, you couldn't, they're not gonna give it to you just because you have a fear that someday. But truly, that's what we have to worry about, is only for that. But this would be, the mortality rate is really, really high. So again, look at these symptoms. What does that sound like to you? Flu-like, right? Flu-like symptoms in the beginning, but then the rash can start, and this variola is the name of the virus, is variola. And anyway, it can give very high fevers, and then typically you are going to go into like pneumonias, and it can, like I said, pretty high death rate. All right, so we're going to move on. This was like the last, I pulled this from the internet and put it in here because he was like one of the last cases of known smallpox. So anyway, I thought I'd just put that in there. And you all can see the difference between a little chicken pox crustal and a little vesicle and a smallpox vesicle. Anyway. And do I have to stop? Wait, not yet. So I thought people were finding out. Leishmaniasis is not something you're going to have to worry about unless you actually go, unless you travel, unless there's a history of travel. But is that really common now for people to travel? Yes. So you're going to have to have seen the history. But that is important to get histories on patients and make sure that you do see this. I have never seen a person with leishmaniasis. I had a friend who did research in leishmaniasis, but I've never seen a actual patient with this. Sand flies are the modes that it's going to usually be transferred with. But anyway, do I have that on your list?
As a proso.
I know, but do I have it on there?
Yeah.
I did put it on there? Okay, well, if I put it on your list, it would be fair. All right, and so that's fine. There's no vaccines. The thing to avoid are the sand flies. So travelers, people, immigrants who come in, they're the ones that you're going to be suspicious, think that this might be.
So that's just like Central and South America.
Yeah.
Or is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there.
You don't wanna know?
No.
Okay.
I'm just-
But it's our patients we worry about that are coming, so whether we worry about it for ourselves, but we do worry about people who come from these areas. Okay, so like I said, I've never seen a case of it, but that doesn't mean it's not out there. I don't even know the incidence of it. Anthrax. Again, what do we worry about anthrax? As a what?
Bioweapon.
As a bioweapon. So we worry about it as a bioweapon. We rarely are seeing, we're rarely seeing anthrax too much. Sometimes you'll see cutaneous anthrax on people who deal with sheep a lot, or wool, or rugs, making rugs that have the actual, areas where they're using all the products that have not gone through any kind of cleaning or whatever. They're using natural products.
What's an
And so-
Escher?
Pardon?
Escher?
Yeah, so like dead, so where you see it now.
Black.
Yeah, so it's like black and dead.
How do you say it?
Yeah, as far I think.
That's fine.
So anyway, cutaneous anthrax we think about, and then you can see that there. Leishmaniasis, this lesion from the sand fly. So obviously a lesion that you would probably address if you had something like that. wouldn't you? And ringworm, we're almost through with the skin, but the ringworm, what causes ringworm, guys? Oh, some people have me now. Ringworm is actually from a fungi, isn't it? So when we think about fungi that can affect the skin, we have this group that we refer to as, these are called tinea. Tinea, not spelled like the worm tinea, that's spelled differently, but that's where it came from. It's because a lot of them can look like those types of infections. But anyway, if it's a tinea infection, it means it's from a fungi. And usually the group, this is called dermatophytes. These are dermatophytes. So if y'all see those two terms, you're going to be knowing which kingdom are you in. Fungi, are they easier to treat than bacteria? No, they're much harder. Why?
Oh, it's spores.
Because they are in what category are they in? Are they prokaryotic or eukaryotic? And what else is eukaryotic? We are. And if we're treating something that's going to fight them, what's going to happen to the therapeutic index? It's going down, meaning that it's usually more dangerous to us. Is that right? If you can treat them cutaneously, then that's the goal, to try to treat them cutaneously, because usually these treatments really do have a really low therapeutic index. But then sometimes people have the nails and hair are involved, and if that's the case, you're probably going to have to treat them systemically. And again, therapeutic indexes are really low, and so you're going to usually have to check liver enzymes routinely or whatever because of that.
I seen this video of these women with the worm like on the
Lower in the eye.
and they like pulled it out. How did you?
Yeah.
How did
Yeah, and that's usually tropical regions where they have the lower, and they can see the worm swimming across the eye. So if they can catch it, yeah, I don't know. It's from a bite. Usually it's transferred from a bite. I don't think I have that on your list. I don't have that on your list, but that can happen. Some of these parasites, and by the way, that's what we're looking at today in lab. We're going to look at some of these worms, and but some of the more common ones we're going to look at. Okay, so it's just going to be the more common ones that we want to see, and look at the ones we might find. Now, as far as ringworm goes, I said they're dermatophytes. The genus, the genera, plural, for these are Trichophyton, Microsporum, and Epidermophyton here. So these are some of the main genera. I don't know if I have that on your, if I don't have it on your thing. It is?
It is.
It is all three of those?
Yeah.
Okay. Dermatophytes. That's what these are, and these are fungi, right? It is really usually kind of easy to see these because all you're going to have to do are scrapings of the skin. And if you do scrapings or if you use lights on like blue lights, they're just going to light up for you. The scrapings you can see under the microscope. But the presentations of these, has everybody seen ringworm? Ringworm is really common. Have you seen it?
A lot of teachers get it because of gross children.
What did you say?
A lot of teachers get it because of gross children.
It's not gross not gross, but because these, we live in a do we forget we live in a microbial world? Not gross, but some things are kind of really contagious. So when you look at these, when you look at some of these pictures, you can see it has a pretty classic kind of presentation. That's actually that is just classic right there. So anyway, we have this out there, and so somebody's skin is, whatever reason, it sets hold and it starts with this. It's pretty easy to treat. Usually it's cutaneous. The treatment's going to be cutaneous, and it's going to be fun. But it can be contagious. It is true that it can be contagious, but it's usually not contagious if it's being treated. So as long as somebody's being treated. I want y'all to know a couple of terms, and so obviously you know your thing. But if you hear a term that says mycosis, mycosis means a fungal infection. So a fungal infection. Superficial would mean what? Yeah. So it's on the skin. And so most superficial mycosis, all you're going to mostly have to do is usually topical treatments, which is going to be, as we said. But sometimes you can have systemic mycosis. I think I talked to you all about Taenia versicolor, didn't I? Taenia versicolor, didn't it? If I said it started with Taenia, what do you know it is? It's a fungus. And versicolor means you're changing color.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see it?
It's highlighted. So the Melis.
Okay. It's highlighted, so we talked about it. Thank you, Sarah, for confirming I'm not completely crazy. Okay, so Taenia versicolor, we had these like spots almost. You're tanning, usually darkening somehow, and you have these like little lighter patches. It's because of Malassezia furfura. This is a yeast that is going to end up causing that, and it's on everybody's skin. So it's not really gross. But it means that person's skin is now compromised because this yeast is really causing the skin to break down, and so it doesn't need treatment. It does need treatment, and and because what you worry about then is I'm scratching. Something's itching when I'm talking. No, it's because you can get something on top of it. I said anything that can break the skin, and if I went back to that picture, you can see anything that can break the skin can set you up for other things as well. So, so this, I think, talks about some of the cutaneous superficial mycosis, but if none on your list, you're not going to have it. That's fine. We'll talk about the island stuff. We're going to go to lab. You have class on? You have class? Okay, thank you.